Hello, Amelia. Thank you for joining today. I'm so excited to dive in with you. You have such a crazy cool background. We met in Montenegro, and very quickly I saw how amazing you've built this career around one at Bundlr, where you were the COO, and that was all about Web3 data solutions. But you also come from this really exciting past of institutional and finance and SaaS. Like it's Coinbase and Snowflake and Salesforce. It's like super, super interesting background. I can't wait to dive in and then see what's coming up next as you're now a founder in residence at Thesis. So to kick us off, I would love to just hear where are you calling in from today and what are you focused on these days?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. Obviously also a big fan of you in Montenegro. So where am I calling in from? I'm calling in from New York at the Brass Factory, which is the home of a lot of Web3 projects, but then also a ton of startups, which is always really inspiring. There's plants everywhere, which sort of gives this like fresh feel. But I'm not usually in New York. I'm usually right outside of Lisbon, which is where I'm now calling home.
And tell me a bit about what you're focused on these days, because it's been a really exciting shift from building this data solution with Bundlr and now moving to Thesis. What is that looking like? What are you focused on now?
I learned so much at Bundlr just doing COO, mainly operations, which was not something that I had an opportunity to do previously in my career. I focused a lot on marketing and sales and sort of building up my acumen around that. And really, everything that I had done leading up to my career was to try and get me to where I am at Thesis right now, which is a founder in residence program. And what that really means is they've basically onboarded five other founders and residents for their first cohort, where you can either start building a project that you're already aware of and have it essentially incubated within the Thesis umbrella. You can help out with an existing project as you sort of discover what you want to build, or you can just discover what you want to build over time. So it's really nice because you have the like safety and security of working with a studio that has had experience spinning out a number of different projects before, but then also have the opportunity to essentially be an entrepreneur and build something that you're really passionate about. So right now, I am deployed to Tahoe, which traditionally was known as the wallet under the Thesis umbrella. So I'm mainly focusing on go-to-market strategy, very, again, COO focused work, I guess you could say. And they're going through a really interesting pivot right now, which is something that I've specialized in, I guess, over the past couple of years from my career. So helping them essentially do that pivot into eventually launching a token, which will be in a DAO next year. As I'm doing that, I'm also dedicating parts of my mornings to incubating an idea that I'm really passionate about. It hasn't been fully solidified, but I'm definitely thinking a lot about reputation and identity, as well as how do we build something that's consumer facing and people who are my friends outside of crypto are actually going to want to use and interact with. So that's a little bit about me and what I've been working on.
What I think is so cool about your background is how you did focus a lot on more traditional marketing and sales, SaaS, and like institutional work. What did get you into the space, and why are you, so inspired to stay and continue building in the cryptocurrency world?
I find like in university or like sometimes when you speak to professionals, they're like, oh, this is the path that you're supposed to take. And it's like the only path that you can take in order to be successful. That was by far not my approach at all. Is definitely very zigzaggy. Before I started working in like larger traditional tech at Salesforce and Snowflake, I actually worked for a large Canadian bank, Scotiabank, which was great. I did a rotational program right out of university. I didn't see myself as a career banker. It was a little bit too different from like my initial intention as a child, which was to be a music theater performer. And so I kind of did like too much of a rotation into becoming a banker at a very traditional bank. But what was great about that experience is that it was the first place that I had been introed and discovered blockchain specifically. And I was not super excited about like the financial application. Obviously, I thought DeFi was incredibly interesting and great because I was in finance, but was more exciting for me was reading about like the music application. For me, I was like, oh wow, like this is really impactful. Like this is really meaningful for not just people in the financial space, but for artists, and like having some sort of provenance over what they had created. And it's funny because I'm like, wow, this is like super interesting. I bought so many books and like read as much as I could about it, but then didn't go directly into having a career in blockchain. I went into tech, but it was always a side interest, side hobby of mine, until I had the opportunity to work at Coinbase, which was like my final woohoo, or my like finally moment that I could get into the space in sort of a safe way, I guess you could say.
I love that. And like, what do you feel has been inspiring you to stay in the space? So I'd love to like hear, what did you learn building Bundlr? Like, what were like the good, the bad, the ugly lessons from building in that space? And then what's keeping you still sparked and like motivated to continue to build yet another, application in this world?
Yeah, I think I mean it's a good question, and I need to remind myself often why I'm here in the first place. It's really easy to get disenchanted by the space, especially like during a bear market, especially given all of the negative press that we'll get. But one of the things that I loved when I went to Bundlr, because Bundlr was like my first real startup environment. I've worked at really large corporations, even though Coinbase was a crypto company, it was still like it's a large corporation. And so when I went to Bundlr, Josh, who's the founder, had built something so meaningful for the Arweave ecosystem by like making it accessible. But then when we started looking at some of the other applications, as it came to like data provenance, that was really meaningful for me specifically because I had spent so much time in like my Web2 career at Salesforce and Snowflake talking about this problem, which is like data security and like data cleanup, which is like so unsexy and so uncool, but so important, wasn't something that centralized technology could ultimately solve because you always had a number of like different risks associated with that. And I'm a huge fan of Arweave. I think permanent data is something that is really impactful, and in terms of like an innovation within that space, it's like pretty impressive. And I don't know why people don't talk about it enough, but maybe I'm just a little bit too nerdy when it comes to data. But Bundlr's ability to apply like real-time provenance to like when something was created by whom and have all of these different attributes associated with the data, that was something that I could get behind. Because when I think about like my friends growing up who are all artists, I could just see the application for them specifically. And then you can go into like the science realm and see like, okay, if a paper was published by someone at a specific time, then you can verify that and ensure that it's not like deleted or manipulated over time. Like there's so many moments, especially within like the science space, where like you don't know who's published it, you don't know who sponsored it, you don't know if it's been changed over time. Like there's no way to sort of track the different versioning and like how that's been done. And by having immutable data, immutable permanent data, which because the two are very different, is something that could be applied to the real world. And I'm always looking for real world applications. So I think that like that's sort of the main thing that keeps me to this space, right? And like working on projects and working on initiatives that are actually going to better society, which is very like it could very much happen within this space, and making sure that I'm constantly aligned to that. I think the challenging part within the space is just determining ways that this can be something like feasible long term from like a monetary standpoint, right? Like how do we actually make our applications and technologies that we're building like being used by a lot of folks, but then also like profitable, so that they have staying power, which I think is still a challenge within this space. But yeah, again, like if I were to sort of like synthesize it to like one sentence on why I'm still here, is just I am always going to be a true believer that there's an opportunity to change the way that things are being done in our society today to ultimately like create better quality and opportunity for folks. And I do think like blockchain is a great solution for that.
I love that. And I would be so curious what your sort of hot take or your controversial opinion, something that people would probably disagree with you on, especially around permanent data, right? There's so much controversy around permanent data, the idea that like centralized solutions are just more efficient. Everyone's on AWS anyway. You know, a lot of these blockchain protocols are built and then they're built on top of AWS. So there's a lot of, pushback on like the true ability to have like permanent immutable data and NFTs even being stored on servers that could ultimately like go down and you don't own that NFT or you can't like reference that file anymore. And then like the inefficiency of actually having permanent storage, like both in terms of like compute power and like processing and memory, and management of that. So what do you feel like is your like opinion on that or hot take or what you've experienced from your own deep dives?
Yeah, I mean, like first I'll say that I think we need to stop doing a like Web 2 versus Web 3. And now there's like this AI category where we're like, for some reason, we all can't play together in the same, like, why aren't we building applications that encompass all three? And I just feel like that is not a conversation that is being done enough. Like we are actually a big fan of the AWS team. They're very supportive of like Web3 and making it successful. And when I say we, like still an advisor to Bundlr, which is great. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to be more synergetic versus trying to pin the two technologies against each other. And ultimately, there's a lot of room to have like standardizations and standards around data in general. The Bundlr team just recently published an article which is like about the data provenance and the provenance trilemma, which I'd highly recommend folks to take a look at. But the Arweave team recently put out some standards around like data licensing, which is like super exciting, and it's something that can be applied across like different spaces. And so I think like my hot take is like, can we try and work better together versus like being two or three very like stark different industries or different groups where it's like Web 2, Web 3, and AI can all work together and we can't create sort of like these super applications around it. When it comes to permanent data, I mean, it's interesting because I do feel like a lot of people will tend to get very scared by permanent data. They don't realize that can actually like encrypt it. I understand that there's some hesitations around like the scalability piece. That's actually a big reason why like Bundlr comes into place, is because it is like vastly more performant and efficient when it comes to storage costs. And if you look at like the total cost of you storing something for what is meant to be forever, then it actually turns out to be pretty efficient when you look at like the break even time. So I don't know if I necessarily have any like hot takes on permanent storage outside of it's not as scary as it might seem because people get afraid of the word permanence. But yeah, I guess those are my two hot takes.
Now you're in this amazing white space, right? Like blank canvas, doing a lot of exploration of what's going to be next in your roster. Are there people or companies that you're watching that are really inspiring you right now?
I'm biased right now because I just met with him, but David Phelps is a dear friend, and I'm always so impressed by his knowledge. And then honestly, talking about making like crypto and Web3 fun again, Joke, which is his project that he's founded, is literally running contests, on-chain contests. They just published one today, not the Joke team, another team, that they're doing like an online dating contest where they have an eligible bachelorette and they're trying to find suitable bachelors for that. In terms of other folks, anyone who's building consumer facing anything right now, I think is very exciting and sort of pushing the boundaries in terms of like, yes, infrastructure is very important. I will never get away from that notion. Like we need to make sure that the pipes and plumbing are working correctly. But like the ENSO team, I think are great. There's a bunch of women who are running that ship and also making it very fun. Boys Club is another great one, which is definitely more of a DAO, but focusing on like the actual application. Oh, and Sound XYZ, I would say, is another great one, which is making like music NFTs and like supporting artists within that space. So I don't know, I just kind of threw out a whole bunch of them. Outside of crypto, I mean, I love reading the Paris Review and like feeling inspiration from some of the like essays and poetry outside of our space. Do I apply all of that knowledge to my day-to-day job all the time? No, but it's like a good source of inspiration for me. So yeah.
We still have to feed our soul. It can't just be like, no. I love that. What a good suggestion. And I
Yeah.
also love how there's such a through line for you about musical theater, which was sort of the original thing you like wanted to do, and how the music is what brought you into the space and curiosity. And then, even bringing up something like Sound XYZ, like still a pulse on that world. That's super special. And so how can we keep in touch with you as you build this next company, share your journey, and then even like learnings around your founder residence from Thesis?
You could reach out to me on Twitter. I'll definitely respond. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find my email somewhere floating around. You could probably find my Telegram somewhere floating around. If you want to take my Telegram, you could take that as well. But I love connecting with folks in the space. And then in terms of like the Thesis residence, founder in residence program, follow the Thesis Twitter. I don't know if you're able to share it in the link somewhere, but they're definitely looking for great talent, not just for the founder in residence program, but for some of the companies that we're spinning up. I'm eventually going to need to hire folks. So definitely keep a lookout for the jobs board within the Thesis team and reach out to myself or somebody else, like Matt, who's the founder at Thesis, who will take your phone call. I promise you that, if you have a great idea and if you're inspired and want to build something interesting within the space. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I will definitely be following along and sharing all of those links in the notes. So thank you so much, Amelia, for joining. It's been so fun to hear your story, to share it. And I'm so excited to see what you do next.
You. I was so happy to be invited to speak to this, and I promise I'll share all the new things that I'm working on. And I hope that we can catch up again soon.
Oh, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.